Since 2014, the Ukrainian government, together with Nazi groups like the Azov Battalion, have besieged the Russian populations in the Donbass, killing an estimated 13,000 people. According to the United Nations. According to the United Nations. According to the United Nations.
Can I just say I'm just not comfortable with you being here. Could you please leave?
So here we go. We've heard the word fascism. Well, now, what is fascism? What it is forced silencing of opposite opinion. There's no better example of seeing this than on Q&A, a TV show in Australia. Look it up, Q&A, and it's hosted by Stan Grant. You'll see the perfect example of fascism. Now, what they do is any opposition to the narrative is silenced. Now, to silence it, they have to justify that silencing by dehumanising whoever says it as evil. So they take the moral high ground by default, dehumanise the opposition by default without the discussion. The whole point is the discussion is supposed to determine the outcome of who's right and who's wrong. They don't have that discussion. That's the thing about the Nazi psychopath. They're correct and good by default, and opposition is evil by default. Forget about the evidence whatsoever. There is no blind justice with these people. You've got to understand it. Anything in their favour is good. So if they invade a country or supply them with weapons or kill them like pigs without giving them the chance to surrender like the Ukrainian army is, which is a war crime, then that's justified because they're the good guys by default. Opposition, right? If they killed POWs without giving them the option to surrender, well, then they would be bad guys because that's blind justice. That's applying the same standards to everybody. But they're not. It's the Ukrainians that are doing that. Now, so they're, by the evidence, by objective reasoning, are the bad guys because that's a war crime to kill POWs who surrender. The whole point of war is to get the opposition side to surrender to avoid as much casualties as possible. Otherwise, it's genocide, right? So it's a war crime, and that's what the so-called good guys by default think they have the right to do. They even bragged about it. The Ukrainians bragged about it because they're so mentally disturbed that they think that they're the good guys when they're committing war crimes. So back to Q&A, they have this, we're the good guys by default, so they can't even see. They're totally ignorant that they're being fascists. They think silencing opposition by force is just and virtuous. They're not applying the same standards to themselves. What the psychopathic Nazi does is, as I said, by default, doesn't matter what the principles are, the evidence, or the double standards are, it doesn't matter. None of the evidence matters. None of the blind justice matters. It's all about we're the good guys, they're the bad guys, so anything in our favour is good. Anything against us, it could be emancipation, self-defence, it could be going on the Q&A TV show and saying, oh, this is bad, they're killing, they were into ethnic cleansing of the Russians in Donbass, 13,000 dead, which is what a guy said, and then he got silenced. No, that is not examined. That is not looked into to see if it's true. It's, oh, that goes against the narrative, therefore it's wrong, it's false, it's evil, silence him. There is any evidence to the contrary of the narrative is evil. So what should happen is objective reasoning, like a supposed court, as opposed to a kangaroo court, where you apply blind justice, look at the evidence, put it on the scales, the blindfold is there so there's no partisan influence. Oh, look, I'm on that guy's side. You know, that's the whole point of blind justice, the symbolism. The whole thing with which law and order is founded on is blind justice. No partisanism involved. Now, the psychopath is completely partisan. They don't weigh up the scales of evidence to see who's right and who's wrong. They rip off the scale, the blindfold, throw the scales to the shit and said, you're them, we're right, you're wrong, that's it. So we get to commit war crimes against you, and that's good and virtuous because you're evil. But if you respond in self-defense, oh, that's aggression. It's not emancipation, it's aggression. And what we've got going on in Ukraine is exactly the same situation. Imagine Russia usurping a government in Mexico who then silences all opposition with fascism, shuts down any TV show station that criticizes him, imprisons his political opposition, which Zelensky has done, then commit war crime, ethnic cleansing of any Americans that are in Mexico, and then want to put a Russian missile base in Tijuana on the border of the USA. Imagine, do you think if the USA went to war with Mexico that they'd be the bad guys, or do you think they'd be the good guys? Exactly. So when you put the evidence there on the scales, put the blindfold on and apply the same standards to both sides. Okay, this is what's happening in Ukraine. Let's see what would happen if we put those standards into Mexico. Apply the same situation to Mexico on the border of the USA. Let's see what the difference is. Oh shit, look, the Ukrainians are the bad guys. They've got a usurped government, NATO-backed, USA-backed. It's a coup. They've got no democracy. It's a fake democracy. So therefore, when you put it on the scales of justice, you'll see that the Ukrainians are actually the bad guys. But on the other hand, they don't discuss any of that. They don't apply any critical thinking or the scales of justice. They throw the scales of justice away. They rip off the blindfold and say, we're the good guys, you're the bad guys, that's it. Let's commit war crimes.